You then step inside and you say, okay, we're doing this. I actually want to make it smoother. I want to get rid of some of the bumps. And this is where you now come into alignment. Again, I'll put them all up and we'll just talk through them. So now think of it this way, and think of the engine and think of that sort of those series of cogwheels running. What happens if one of the cogs is out of place? It's just going to either slow the process down or stop the process, or it's not going to be as smooth as it can. So you think of alignment. You think of that clear sense of what I'm doing, why I'm doing it, how I'm doing it, and everything working together. If you like the analogy of a well-running engine, then use that analogy. But in an organization, you turn around and say, what does that look like? What does that look like? Sitting down the bottom here, hopefully you've crafted some form of a strategic plan which makes sense. From that strategic plan, you now have a series of objectives. So the starting point in alignment is, where am I actually seeking to go to? What are my objectives? So I'm turning around and saying that I wish to achieve certain things over the next 3 years, for example. What are they? So if you had to sit down now and list out what are the strategic objectives of my organization, write them down. Could you do it? Are they in a language which is, I'm not going to say English, but in a language which everyone in the organization actually understands and it means something to them? Rather they say, that's just management waffle. Is there actually a language where they say, I know what that means, I know what it means to me, I know what it means to me in my role, but more importantly, I know what it means to the organisation. Example, professional service firm. They're up there. I won't point to them, but they're up there. Professional service firm up there. Excuse me, talking about the performance of their staff and talking about benefits and things like that. And one of the partners turns around and says, what really, and uses some rude words, annoys them was senior staff taking extra leave. So what's the story behind this? Well, we allow our staff to take extra leave. They can apply for it. Why? It's one of these HR things. We had to do it to make ourselves look good to attract people. But they're not meant to take it. They're not meant to take it. Senior staff are not meant to take the leave. They're meant to work. So where's the problem lie? With the staff or with some of the partners in that firm and a duplicity in the way in which they're connecting? For me, I look at that and say, well, there's just a misalignment here. Either have the policy or don't have the policy, and you have the policy, understand what it means. So then there was a long discussion behind the merits of the policy and why they originally put it in, and they actually shifted. And for those partners who couldn't get their head around it, they were spoken to by the managing partner. The need to actually understand and to get away from this, motive of driving hours. So we start down the bottom and you say, are your strategic objectives clear and articulate, and do they actually direct the organisation where they want to go to? Yes, tick. Are we actually structured in a way which allows us to focus on those? So there's a very good article, it's a pretty old article now, Organ Graphics. Mitzberg and someone else wrote it. If you want to look at that, let me know and I'll send you the link to it. It basically was I think a one-off academic article. I don't think it reappeared again after that. I can't think of any books which were written from it. But it actually turned around, we use it quite a lot. It's an article which said, so understand what your objectives are, now build your organisation to deliver on those. It's not about your organisational chart, it's about the way you function, it's the way you operate. So build your organisation to focus on what your delivery is about, what you're seeking to achieve. In most cases, we build our organisation from the inside, structure in terms of here's the boss, here's the next tier, here's finance, here's marketing, here's production, here's whatever. But we actually don't turn around and say, let's throw all that up in the air and let's look where our customers are, what we're seeking to deliver to them, and what is the best way to make that happen. And it's not about your title, it's not about your position, it's about that mechanical operation. Are you actually structured to deliver on those strategic objectives? If you had to sit down now, and if you're all given a sheet of paper, if you did this with yourself Saturday night when you were bored, or did it with your management team one Monday morning when they were still asleep and hadn't had their coffee, say, here's a blank sheet of paper, draw the way we work. Draw the way we work to deliver value to our customers. And you'd be surprised how many would sit there with a blank sheet of paper and they actually know how to draw it. And come around the other side of that and say, And if my senior management team and myself don't know how we work to deliver value, how do we actually work? It's an interesting question. So, structure. Then you can see how we begin to flow out of that. We know our objectives. We know how we're structured to actually deliver on those. Excuse me. What are we measuring? What are we measuring? Are we measuring the right things? We all know if you measure the wrong things, you get the wrong things. If you don't measure the right things, you don't get what you want. But I've actually turned around and said, these are my objectives. This is how I need to structure myself to deliver on those. Am I actually measuring that now? Am I actually measuring what I should be measuring? Or am I off measuring my costs, my profit, my revenue, all these things which are the outputs of what this is meant to be achieving? But I'm not actually measuring the things which allow it to be achieved. So when you look at your performance metrics, you say, actually measuring the right thing. And we tend not to measure the right things. We tend to measure the things everyone else does. And they're external. They're not the things which actually drive. They're not the catalysts, if I can use that language. My objectives, the way I'm set up, I'm measuring the right things. Am I actually putting resources and processes in place? Do I actually make decisions in the right way? Do I actually make decisions which impact customer value in the correct way, or do I make them on another premise? So how do I actually budget? Where do I allocate my money to? How are decisions made? Do I have something which turns around and says, every decision which needs to be made, every allocation of funds over a certain amount, every change in process which is going to occur? First question is, how does it impact customer value? How does it impact customer value? If you do something like that, you suddenly begin to shift the way in which the organisation focuses, because you're now saying, well, it's not about reducing costs, it's about how it impacts customer value, it's about effectiveness. How are decisions regarding resources and processes made? What does your business case template look like? If you're in a large organisation, you have business cases being prepared, is the first section in there, what is the impact on customer value? Often it's not even mentioned, doesn't even appear, because that's not where the focus is. The focus is normally around cost. It's efficiency, it's not effectiveness. Values, culture, guiding principles, what are they? How do they work? Do they in actual fact support back to here? And the last one, on what basis are we rewarding people? And we know reward is not necessarily just about money. Reward is about recognition. Reward is about opportunity. Reward is about that person's ability to grow, to develop, and put something in. So how many people here would consider that their business is dependent upon knowledge? They may loosely call themselves a knowledge organisation. If we don't have the right people thinking about the right things all the time, we're not going to grow. It's probably every organisation here. But hang on, I manufacture widgets. Yeah, where's the next widget come from? And then you turn around and say, and do I actually encourage people to think? Or do I tell them to shut up and to focus on what I've asked them to do? These are values and culture issues, aren't they? And you come back and say, but these are my objectives. It's based upon my strategic plan. This is how I'm going to compete. But I'm actually not building the right culture to allow that to be done. And when I come to reward people, I'm not rewarding them by saying, and I'm going to allow you to have time to do this. I'm going to give you acknowledgement for your contribution, for coming up with these new ideas. So when you look at the cogs, you turn around and say, objectives, structure, metrics, allocation, culture, reward, do they actually flow? And you turn around and say, but how do I actually do this? Tell you how we do it. We actually go into the business. We say, give us your strategic plan. Give us your mission statement. Give us value statements. Show us how you're structured. Tell me what you measure. Tell me how you do your budgets and how you allocate. Show me what your reward structure is. Let me go around and chat to a few people and see how things operate. Now let me lay those out on a sheet of paper. And we actually will use a wall like this and you stick them all up. And you go through and say, okay, who can actually understand these strategic objectives? Well, not too sure what that means. I understand what it means, but I actually don't know what it actually means in terms of what I need to do. And you can see these very, you can talk about them as being funny examples, but they're not funny examples. It's just organisations struggling to get their head around it. And my classic one is a not-for-profit. They went up to Sydney. No, it wasn't not-for-profit, it was a firm of lawyers actually. Went up to Sydney, came back. They had 100 actions to deliver on their strategic plan because they mechanically wrote out objectives and then wrote out actions beside it. The not-for-profit I was going to talk about came back with 49 typed A4 pages of actions because they took strategic objectives, I think there were 7 of them, they applied them to each one of their areas, each one had to take 7 objectives and write down how they were going to deliver on those. They put that all together and here is now my action plan. And it probably should have just gone straight in the bin. But you put that up on the wall and you say, how are you actually capable of delivering on something like that? And how does that achieve alignment? So if you went through that exercise and pulled out the visible representations of how you function as an organisation, how aligned would that be? Where does this also become very useful? So apart from looking at yourself internally, where's the other place where this becomes useful? Imagine if you're going to join with someone, an alliance, a merger. This is a very useful tool for mergers. Why? Do that for me, do that for them, and then what am I going to find? Where's the misalignment? Where is the misalignment? Windows security is tracking me. So we actually, when we're looking at mergers and alliances, we actually do this on both sides. And we just call this the alignment exercise. Are the objectives the same? Are they structured the same way? Do they measure the same things? Do they make decisions the same way and what do their processes look like? How does this fit together and how does that fit together? And you suddenly see all the areas where the organisations don't fit. And now that's what you're going to have to work to get together. And it tells you whether the merge is sensible or not. So this also serves as a very good framework for that. Delivery, alignment. So you can now see I've got a mechanism to deliver. There's a way we do things. I'm now actually looking inside the organisation to make sure I'm removing all the roadblocks, all the things which are going to confuse, trip people up, stop them from doing their jobs well, and lower the performance of the organisation. It's your second exercise.